Hello everybody and welcome back to our podcast. We've got a special guest with us today, and also we are with David and Mary. They can introduce themselves as I went, but I'll go over to David first. Hello David.
Thank you, John. Welcome everybody to our podcast, and yes, you're quite right, we do have a special guest, and we'll be introducing him fairly shortly. Mary.
Yeah, hi. Really good to be here again. Looking forward to the podcast and looking forward to questioning our special guest.
David, over to you.
Well, thank you, John. Today we have with us our CEO of Saha, and I'm going to ask him to introduce himself to our audience.
Thank you, David. It's good to be with you, Mary, and John. You guys have used the word special several times now. And can I just say, I'm not special, but I am very grateful to be chief exec of a special organisation. And that's how I've always viewed it from my perspective, working for this housing association that's part of the Army Group. So yes, I've been chief exec now for 2.5 years, and I guess that's where I'm going to get the questions from. But I should just say that I joined Saha as a young man, if anyone can believe that. I came from a banking environment and really wanted to do a job with, I felt, some real purpose to it. And this opportunity came up as an assistant finance officer. And I think we had 10 people working for Saha then. We were working in a burnt out, or the side of a burnt out hostel in the middle of London. And we had 10 hostels at that time and one housing scheme. So that's where I came into employment of Saha. And that was some nearly 38 years ago. Until the day we have now. So grateful to be here and just looking forward to answering some questions.
Well, thanks, Nigel. 38 years, crikey. Yeah, a lifetime and a bit by the sound of it. But when, as you say, when we last spoke to you, or when we had our inaugural podcast, you kindly came on and introduced them. And yeah, you've been there for a while now. And I've got to say, the last year probably has been, let's say, a bumpy ride for quite a few of us. Ooh. But how has it been for you at Saha over the last year or so?
Well, to be quite honest, I guess I could use words like interesting. Certainly not what I expected. A number of things have impacted us all within the last few years. But certainly, I guess I've been through a difficult time with this organisation because things needed to change. There was a famous quote that I've used in our corporate plan from the mother of the Salvation Army, Catherine Booth, who said, in order to change the future, you've got to disturb the present. And that's been hard because there's been a tremendous change with colleagues at work, and we've been trying to put a number of things in place because they needed to be put in place. It's been difficult, David, and certainly I can touch on a few of those issues as we go through this podcast. But as I sit here today, I'm full of positivity about how we're coming out of those issues and able to face the future.
That's fantastic, and we like to be positive about things. So, what's been your, I would say, the best moment? What's been the highlight of the last year for you, if there is one?
Well, I guess it is quite an interesting question in itself. I think there's no doubt I have missed meeting service colleagues and our residents. That doesn't matter whether that's within one of our larger life houses or whether it's through to who we have staying in our general needs accommodation, or indeed sort of meeting with young people in that environment. And over the last 2.5 years, sadly, that has not been possible because of the pandemic. So I guess one of the highlights for me in the last few months has been able to visit Braintree and visit the foyer there. I have such a well, it's inspirational going to any of our centres, but the foyers are just I love visiting where young people who have come out of some very difficult circumstances have got a safe, secure environment, and they've got a really caring team of colleagues there who really do help give them the opportunity to face the future and are influential in having a can-do attitude. So that's been great. And particularly to go to Braintree now and see how we can work within this great group that we're in, the Salvation Army group. And so let me just explain that somewhat. Because in Braintree, you've got a sort of a different aspect of each of our provisions, really. First of all, we have a lifehouse in Braintree. It's a 13-bed space unit, and our parent, the Salvation Army, are managing agent there. We've got, of course, our foyer, led by the team led by Mark Watson. And if anyone has opportunity to go to foyer at Braintree or any of our foyers, please do, because it's an absolute inspiration. But we have general needs as well in Braintree. Some of that is adjacent to the foyer. But there are two other aspects that have really pleased me, and that's the working with the Salvation Army, because the Salvation Army, SATCOL, which is another subsidiary of the group, have opened up a donation centre. And it's a fabulous place. It really moves on from the charity shops, but it's led by another great team, and the manager there has encouraged volunteers from the foyer to work there. But not only that, she has helped them with provision of materials, hard goods, to move on, to help them move into accommodation where they're going to have to be independent. So you've got Mark and his team giving them the necessary information they need to manage a tenancy, and material goods that are very helpful. So to visit Braintree has been a fantastic moment in the last few months, and we're starting to see that happen elsewhere where we have that relationship. But the other thing is the church in Braintree, which, as you might imagine, is a rather, I guess, I don't want to be rude here because I'm a silver-haired person, but they are, an older congregation, but they've got a Salvation Army officer there, the minister of that church, and he works very well with Mark. So in one sense, he helps with the football team. They participated in the Partnership Cup up in Manchester, meeting up with some real sort of characters there. But also they work with a community choir, which so the congregation of that church and the young people mixed together. And I just think that's all of that. You can take all of that I've just told you and put it into a pot, and to me that makes you've got all the ingredients of what Saha is about there. Transformational stuff.
Fantastic. I mean, that's really inspirational. And I read with interest in The Loop. And if any of our listeners here want to read a little bit more, there was a lovely article featuring Nigel in The Loop. So you can get some more information there as well. Mary, I believe you have a question.
Yes, I do, actually. Thank you for that, Nigel, by the way. I've visited Braintree a couple of times, and you're quite right. It's a wonderfully inspirational place, and I'll also give a shout to another foyer that I visited, which is down in New Haven.
Yeah.
And actually, David and I presented an award down there, didn't we, David?
We did, yeah.
Yeah. So that was really, really cool too. And they are, I mean, all of them. I think we also have a Doncaster foyer, yes. Is that right? So so I think they all do just an amazing job. I wanted to pick up as well, Nigel, actually, on the point that you made about missing residents. I think all of us, certainly with some aspect of customer facing to our jobs, have really missed being in touch with people, being in touch with residents, particularly as a customer insight officer and part of the customer insight team. It's my job. So it has been extremely hard not to be able to do that. But one of the things that we found in the customer insight team is that we've developed some other ways, like this podcast, and also having Zoom or Teams meetings where we've been able to engage with residents in a different way.
Yeah. So
I just wondered on that topic whether organisationally this whole business of COVID and lockdown has had a positive and negative effect on the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let me take the negative ones first, and I can reel those off. First of all, literally a week before we knew we were going to lockdown, we had to mobilise. And frontline services and back office. Back office, let me start with that. We had to ensure that everyone had the tools to be able to run the sort of the administration remotely. And I think we've been tremendously successful in doing that. And that will affect ways of working going forward. So, our head office in Lloyd's Avenue, it will not be a base now in the future for banks of finance staff, banks of head office personnel. No, it will be a place of holding meetings, and it will be an opportunity to get some more efficiency and cut down our overhead as we look forward to sort of moving perhaps to smaller facility, and maybe even with the Salvation Army, who knows? But we'll see on that. So that's opportunities about new ways of working, but we very quickly had to adapt. And that's been hard for some people. A lot of people have taken to it, but I am aware that not everyone has the ability to find a workspace in their home. Other people may have, small children. It's never easy to be working in that environment. But I think we've coped, and we've coped well. More importantly, dare I say, is our frontline offering. And people, as our colleagues working in stuff, they've just got on with it. And I know that has been difficult, because there has been sort of a case of where there's been an outbreak of COVID. Colleagues have had to go the extra mile plus. And I'm aware that causes fatigue and some stress, and that we've had to provide a service level which our colleagues are passionate to do, but it's also been difficult in some areas where people are locked down, because that can cause some difficult issues. And I can only just commend our frontline colleagues for what they've done. I think, so when they hear about, we've managed to work remotely, I'm sure they're all thinking, well, that's great, but, we've been through some hard times, and that very much is recognised. So, and we've had to deal with issues with some of our residents around loneliness, around the fact that they've not been able to get out. And we've experienced all of that, but I guess we've all had coping mechanisms around that. But that has been difficult. There's no doubt about it. That has been difficult. I think the good thing now, looking forward, is that we are starting to be able to plan visits, come and see the work that's going on. I want to get board involved in that, because a number of our board members haven't really been anywhere for 3 years, because the last strategy away day we had was down in the southwest, but we need to get some of our board members out and be connected with that. But one thing I just wanted to mention is the way of working we now have, because we've got a Teams meeting here. We can do this. They can be organised very quickly. We can connect very quickly. But one aspect of that, because I know that some people would say it's not the same as face-to-face, one aspect of that is I do think it helps one of our values, and that value being servant leadership. Because as we sit in this environment, and it may be that we have, 10, 12 people sitting in this environment, there is no head of the table. We're all equal in what we have to bring. And that should be the case, even if we are face-to-face, of course. But I think it's another aspect of our culture. It's another aspect of our value of servant leadership that I think we are able to demonstrate in what we do. I do think we need to now take the opportunity to get round and meet people and see how we can support that frontline service. But I think that's important. And we take from this terrible pandemic the positives that have come from it as well in how we now look to the future working.
Thanks, Nigel. I completely agree. And the feedback that Customer Insight have had from our roadshows has been that whilst people are happy to chip into a focus group via Teams, they would very much like to meet with us face to face and give their opinions and chat and have a coffee. But I also completely take on board what you're saying about a meeting with, the kind of servant leadership situation. And I think in the podcast, certainly area, we've experienced very much that aspect of everybody. People just bring their personalities to our podcasts, and there's no kind of sense of it being a formal setting. So it's great from that point of view. So thank you. Thanks. I'm going to hand back over to David, who I think's got another question for you, at least another one.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, Nigel, the recent housing white paper, which intends to sort of increase residents' voice, if you like, in the saying how things are run. What effect has that had on your work in particular? I know it's had a big effect on most organisations or housing associations, but what effect has it had on you?
Well, I think I'm not going to say we've preempted anything here, but this has been a long time coming. So there's been a lot of information coming out about what the white paper will mean around tenant engagement and around sort of building safety, etc., etc. And I think within I'm really pleased. One of the other things I think I've been really pleased to be able to bring to board is our corporate strategy, which really does focus in on our residents and our people. We head it up with this 4 Ps about people, pounds, practices, and the property aspect, trying to cover all of that offering. But what it has meant is that we've not really been able to progress that. And I can tell you now that in December we are bringing a number of those strategies that will impact on that corporate plan and the deliverables from that. They've been brought to board. So, for instance, we're taking our people strategy, which will highlight the objectives for the people team going forward that will impact on our service as well. Our customer strategy, and I think Mary mentioned earlier on that we've got a head of customer now in place, and that's going to be very helpful in bringing, as I say, the resident, the customer, to the heart of all that we do. So I think that's quite encouraging. And the fact is we have had a few restructures which mean that the service we offer should be more streamlined. So where we have now neighbourhood team workers, I'm hoping that will have a real sight from people who are in our services. So the other aspects of the white paper really do centre around building safety, tenant engagement, and so we're hoping that we can bring that knowledge of the aspects that we're trying to put in place going forward. There is always a cost to that, of course, and all of that gets put into our long-term financial plan. And just a couple of aspects on that. I mean, we're all concerned, obviously, about building safety, and we have a quite a complex offer from a big life houses, and you can imagine. I could give you one example. Apparently, we have 6,500 fire doors. All of those need to be up to standard. So it's there's a lot of work to cover there. The whole thing about carbon neutrality has very much been in the news, and we, along with our other RPs, are trying to understand how we can plan for that going forward. And again, let's take an example. A gas boiler, for instance, the cost of replacing those, when we can replace them. And I think, there's going to be news about grants available. But basically, I think there needs to be a lot more thought about, the technical expertise around that and what that means. And will it be adequate? So there's so much work there, which will certainly keep us busy, but we will need to engage with our customers, our tenants, our residents, as we go forward and plan how we contribute into this carbon neutral agenda as well.
Lovely. I think it's good, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I would like to see is more people actually getting involved in giving saha feedback, for example, on how they would like to see the way forward. Because obviously, the more information you get from tenants and from residents, obviously, the better you're able to plan. Nigel, before we move on, could you just give us some information about the origin of the housing white paper?
The background to the white paper is for those of you who perhaps wonder why this has all come about. Of course, it's the tragedy of Grenfell and the impact there around the point about no one listening to the tenant's voice, and of course then whole aspects of building safety and particularly around materials that were used and really weren't adequate. So you've got a whole host of issues there, and so that's why we need to be more serious about tenant engagement. We need to be more serious about listening to our customer, of course, and we need to be more serious about ensuring that we've got those adequate precautions in place. I would say that we've done, a lot of work around key performance indicators and around sort of our assessments, fire risk assessments. The key thing here is making sure that once the assessment is done, that the actions are completed and that they are monitored going forward. So we want everyone to make sure when we talk about having a secure home, that it's secure in the sense of any of the aspects of safety, and we take that very, very seriously.
Lovely, thank you, Nigel. As I was going to say, I think we over to John now. John, have you got a question for Nigel?
Yes, really going on from everything you've said. Then, where do you see saha over the next 5 years?
Well, I think that's a great question, because it's sort of I'm looking. These have been difficult years, and I don't need to give a full explanation about that. All I would say is that we've achieved some things over the last 2 or 3 years which have been significant. And they've impacted the relationship with our regulator, because we are regulated, rightfully so, and our customers may know that we're at the moment a non-compliant organisation because of our relationships. And we've worked on those with our parent. And just a word about our parent. The Salvation Army is an international organisation. The UK, their scope is here, and you can't see, but I'm putting my hands out wide. Okay, saha's scope is very narrow, and I quite often give this analogy, and I think I've got a view on this because I'm a member of the Salvation Army, and that's my church, and I know the fantastic work they do. But also I understand that it's a massive organisation, and it's a bit like a supertanker. So sometimes it can take, a few miles to change. Whereas saha and a lot of the other subsidiaries that work within the group are akin to tugboats. So we can make quick decisions, we can change direction very quickly. But sometimes, that supertanker needs a tugboat to help it manoeuvre. And I think that's probably a good analogy. And when I first joined, when I first came in as chief executive, understanding was probably missing. In other words, I felt like I've been walking on eggshells because I'm passionate about mission of transformation. We talk about transforming lives in a housing sense. That means, a secure environment. It means giving people, giving them tools to see that they can actually have that potential to flourish and achieve. The Salvation Army, of course, the wider sense of transformation, we fit very well into that mission. But the eggshells is between wanting to work with that mission, but also understanding that we have got a lot of government funding, and therefore we are regulated, and we have to sort of make sure that we comply in a governance and financial viability sense. I think there's been a lot of education around that with my colleagues over at the Salvation Army, and we are working that forward. Indeed, we've been extremely successful in getting grant monies written back and written off, which make that less of a financial viability question for both saha and the Salvation Army, and it means that I can prove to our regulators that we have some real assurance around the assumptions that go into our long-term plan. And we're working very closely with both organisations to move that forward and get back to compliance. So where do I want to see this organisation in 5 years' time? Well, one, I want to see it to be compliant, and we're working through that improvement plan to be that. In 5 years' time, I want to look back and say what a valuable asset this organisation is to the overall mission of the Salvation Army. And I sort of explained a bit about the Braintree experience. I want to see that mirrored. So as we're having this podcast, I know that Middlesbrough is speaking to the manager at the donation centre there, trying to get some sort of partnership set up, as we can see in Braintree. And I'm hoping that sort of initiative is seen everywhere. I also want to grow the organisation with our partners, particularly the Salvation Army, in finding more accommodation that we can use as move-on accommodation, so that people who come into sort of supported facilities can then find that they can move on, still have support, but enabling them to make that wish of seeing their lives flourish possible. And overall, I really just want to see the synergy that should be possible working with such a group as the Salvation Army actually be coming to being.
Thank you, Nigel. It's been great to listen to everything you've had to say. I'm sure it's opened up a lot of things to our general residents who probably didn't know a lot of what goes on behind the scenes. So, again, thank you for all of that. I'm going to go back to David and Mary. Any more questions for Nigel?
No, not a question, but I would just like to say thank you from the podcast team for your time, Nigel, and I think really looking forward to moving forward. And I think what you mentioned about Move On, coming from a background of supported housing most of my years, I think it's so crucial to look at that, to look at Move On for people who've been in supported housing. And just a quick plug for the fact that with regard to part of compliance, there are resident compliance groups that our listeners can join, the Building Safety Group, the Local Offer Group, and Feedback and Complaints Group. So if anybody listening to this would like to take part in any of those groups, we're moving forward with resident focus on those areas. So, yeah. Thank you, Nigel, anyway. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Great to talk to you guys.
David?
Just to say thank you, Nigel. Inspirational as always, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, David. Good to speak to you, and it's good to see you as well over this call. So really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being here today, and also thanks to our listeners. Hope you've enjoyed this one. We're all done for the day, so we'll wrap this up and say goodbye until the next podcast. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me. See you next time.
And certainly a goodbye from me.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.